Going to share with you a few clips in a moment. Some people who didn't know Laken Riley speaking about her passing. Then Ted Cruz, who falls into the category of politicians who are using her name for their own political leverage. And then the most important words, as far as I'm concerned, the father of Laken Riley speaks. So let's talk about the first group.
There is an illegal immigrant in our country, and they commit a crime. Democrats protect them.
And Laken Riley, she did everything right. She ran in the morning. She
Laken Riley.
I know how to say the name.
I was quite surprised recently when there was a complete 360 in terms of how Trump and co saw TikTok. But if you actually go on TikTok and type in a subject which is maybe politically favourable towards the Republican Party or the Trump wing of the Republican Party, you can understand why they want TikTok to stay. For the simple reason, there are votes there.
My worst fears were confirmed because when I first heard this crime, it sounded oddly familiar in a very disturbing way. I knew it. I didn't want to know it, but I knew it. From the very beginning, it's not just her, this young girl from the University of Georgia. Yes, I know she didn't go there. She was a nursing student. She already went to the University of Georgia. The person who killed her came over the border in September of 2022 under the Biden administration. It's an illegal immigrant from Venezuela. That's who killed her.
No other reason than they've calculated it's very easy to put a subject into, let's say, the Trumposphere, where TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, etc. picks up on it. But in particular on TikTok, it's really like one message can be like everywhere.
What's up, everybody? Trump Latinos, check this out. Our tribute to Laken Riley is number 7.
After a 22-year-old nursing student, Laken Riley, was murdered in Athens, Georgia, while on a jog. The suspect, a 26-year-old illegal immigrant from Venezuela named Jose Antonio Ibarra. To sum it up, a Biden migrant murdered an American woman in a sanctuary city.
We're just really going to pretend that this is Donald Trump's fault because he said mean things 5 years ago. Sure, it has nothing to do with Biden's open border policy.
So that's very simple. Now, I think it's really important that people get to express their opinion, but here's the thing. From my experience, when there is, how should we say, a public outpouring of grief, people tend to feel quite, how should we say, honest. They don't really repeat political lines or political information. They don't rush to release songs that are meant to be some tribute and then again and again and again promote it. They don't make sure that they put up a comment and make sure that comment is linked to the sale of a t-shirt.
Everybody, Trump Latinos, we got the number 2 song right now in the world. We're fighting Cardi B for the number 1 spot. Laken Riley, the tribute.
We know everybody loves us.
The last outbreak of public grief and emotion which I witnessed was a year or so ago. In fact, it was a bit more than a year or so ago, when the Queen died. I was in London at the time, and I remember after going to, literally it had been announced, going to Buckingham Palace, and the outbreak of grief was not let's make a 2-second video, and it was just pay our respects and be quiet and solemn. Screaming and shouting obviously is how it happens on TikTok or social media in some elements. And then we get to the politicians. Ted Cruz, a lot of people unfortunately have lost their lives during Ted Cruz's reign in Texas through guns. Speak to parents who've lost their children. Ted Cruz doesn't particularly seem to want to be shouting out their name, calling out their name at this particular junction.
Thank you, and I thank my colleagues for holding this press conference. Laken Riley should still be alive. The reason that she is not alive is because of Joe Biden's open borders and because of the Democrats' policies refusing to secure our border. There is a simple but-for causation. The murderer took the life of that 22-year-old beautiful young woman, a nursing student in Georgia out jogging. We had him in custody. He was apprehended in El Paso, crossing illegally from Venezuela. Had Joe Biden simply followed the law, what would have happened is that murderer would have been put on a plane, flown back to Venezuela, and Laken Riley would still be alive. But the Biden administration decided their political agenda was more important than protecting the lives of American citizens, and so they let the murderer go. But that wasn't the last stop of the failures that unfolded. The murderer went from El Paso to New York City, where he was arrested once again, this time for endangering the safety of a child. Once again, LAKEN Riley's life could have been saved, but New York City, unfortunately, is a sanctuary city where Democrats refused to enforce the law, so they let the murderer go. Had New York City put him in jail, that murderer would not have been in Georgia to beat LAKEN Riley to death. But New York City let him go once again. This revolving door happens over and over again, and I have to say just how indefensible the Biden administration's policies on the border are was laid bare during the State of the Union, where in his prepared remarks, President Biden did not plan to say a word about LAKEN Riley. And then in response to heckling, he did address her. He got her name wrong. And here was Joe Biden's defense. He said she was killed by a, quote, illegal. And he said, well, legals kill people too. I want you to understand what the President of the United States is saying. Because there are murderers in America, it's perfectly okay for him to continue releasing more murderers into America. That is asinine. That makes utterly no sense. And by the way, the insult was compounded where the next day, what did Joe Biden do? He didn't apologize to LAKEN Riley's parents. He didn't take responsibility that his policies released the murderer that took their daughter's life. He didn't do any of that. Instead, he apologized for using the word illegals. Because to this White House, it's more important to genuflect before the American Politburo of language than it is to actually protect American citizens. Listen, the LAKEN Riley Act is simple common sense legislation. It passed the House with a large bipartisan majority. The Senate ought to take it up and pass it as well, although I have to say I have complete confidence that Chuck Schumer and the Senate Democrats have no interest in doing so, because the sad priority of this White House and of the Senate Democrats is they put illegal aliens and criminals consistently higher on the priority list than protecting the lives of American citizens. And over again, we see more and more Americans losing their lives as a result.
And I come back to it. I tend to think if you're grieving, if you've missed somebody, whether you knew them or not, the first thing you tend to do is not rush to social media or to a recording studio or anything like that. You pay your respects in your own private, solemn way. And the person that clearly is doing that, and I feel actually sorry for him because he's been forced to go in front of a media camera just to set the record straight and just call for some respect and dignity to be attached to his daughter.
Former President Trump meeting with LAKEN's mom and stepdad earlier this month, just days after this tense exchange at the State of the Union. Georgia Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene imploring President Biden to say LAKEN Riley's name.
LAKEN Riley, an innocent young woman who was killed by an illegal.
I feel like she's being used somewhat politically.
How do you feel about that?
It makes me angry. She was much better than that. She should be raised up for the person that she is.
An angel on earth, her heartbroken father says, now gone far too soon. What gives you strength?
Knowing that she's looking down on me, it has made me so much stronger.